Hi, my name is Michaela Gieske, and my diversity analysis project is based on Trevor Noah's autobiography, Born a Crime. Trevor Noah was born in South Africa during the time of an institutionalized system of racial segregation called apartheid. One of the laws under apartheid prohibited mixed-race marriages, and since Noah's mother was black and his father was white, he was essentially born a crime. Noah's book recounts his life growing up in South Africa during the era of white minority rule. As a colored child, meaning half black and half white, his childhood was even more complicated. He struggled to find his identity in a world where the mere existence of a biracial child was illegal. As Noah narrates his trials and triumphs throughout the book, the stories he chooses to share encompass themes of race, culture, gender, and class. South Africa is an extremely diverse country with 12 native languages. Noah was raised in his mother's native Xhosa culture, and because his parents' relationship was forbidden, his father was often unable to see him. His mother spoke several languages, and Noah learned many as well. In knowing several different languages, including many native to South Africa, he was able to seamlessly move through different groups of people throughout his childhood. It gave him an advantage, an ability to adapt to certain situations and connect with different people. He felt it made him a cultural chameleon. Christianity was very important to Noah's mother and became a major part of his life. His family attended a black church, a colored church, and a white church. His mother's religion influenced his life in a number of ways, and her strong beliefs guided Noah to lead a life of no limitation. He embraced his mother's culture, but learned to also understand his ability to lead a white lifestyle. Noah introduced the theme of gender throughout his childhood. He was raised among willful and independent women, but South Africa was predominantly a patriarchal society. Black women were expected to work as maids or in factories, and were seen as inferior to their male counterparts. Though Noah's mother was always moving against the grain and pursued things outside of the norm, she faced serious abuse from her second husband. Abel, Noah's stepfather, imposed his oppressive beliefs on the family. He was often violent, exposing Noah to the seriousness of gender inequality. Race was the most dominant theme throughout Noah's memoir. During apartheid, people who were white were favored, and those who were black suffered extreme oppression. As a colored child, Noah recalls struggling to identify where he fit in due to his lighter complexion. Colored people were considered to have more privilege than black people, but didn't possess the equal rights of white people. Even his family offered him special privileges due to his father's Swiss-German heritage. In Noah's school, classes were divided by academic ability, which translates to better schooling for white children. He was placed in the highest class, but soon realized he was one of very few colored children. This made him feel misplaced, and he decided to move to lower class where he felt he belonged. Noah mentions that although he was colored, because he was raised culturally black, that is how he identified himself. It didn't take long for Noah to realize the system of oppression he was living in as he grew older. Through a first-hand experience, Noah recalls police officers favoring him because they believed him to be white. He says, "In society, we do horrible things to one another because we don't see the person it affects. Because if white people ever saw black people as human, they would see that slavery is unconscionable." Noah explains that the goal of apartheid was to turn South Africa into a white country. White people forced black natives to work as laborers in order to generate their wealth. Mobility within the system wasn't necessarily legal, but very difficult and limited. Noah's mother commuted to work as a secretary in a white-sanctioned area, but was not permitted to live there. If any black individual was caught in a white-sanctioned area without a passbook identifying them and their employment, they would be arrested. Noah mentions that help from the privileged is basically the only way to move up within the system. He recalls his experience making and selling mixed CDs and DJing with a friend, an opportunity he wouldn't have achieved without help. Even after the fall of apartheid, systematic racism was still prevalent throughout South Africa. There are two specific areas of Noah's book that come to mind when thinking of what type of community education would be beneficial. First, the issue of violence and domestic abuse. Noah recounts his childhood struggles growing up with an extremely abusive alcoholic stepfather. He witnessed his mother being beaten and saw that violence was part of a relationship in his stepfather's culture. Identifying that violence and abuse is not a form of love is the first step. Communities should offer resources for those suffering from abuse and should educate individuals on their role in prevention. An open and safe line of communication is extremely beneficial for those seeking help. When Noah's mother would turn to the police for help, they routinely sided with his stepfather. If any member of the community or law enforcement had taken his mother's pleas seriously, it would have saved his family and others from unwarranted abuse. Second, the issue of racism must be addressed. This book is clearly centered on this issue, and apartheid itself was a system based on race. In order to overcome such an issue, communities must be able to identify and understand South Africa's history of racism. Because South Africa is so diverse, South Africans must be able to recognize and respect one another's cultures with sensitivity and empathy. Without proper resources and education on the topic, little can be done to overcome this issue. This book was an incredible read. My mother is from South Africa and most of my family still resides there. As a white child growing up during apartheid, my mother did not suffer the extreme oppression that Trevor Noah and other families experienced. This book enabled me to see and learn about apartheid and the struggles of South Africa through a new lens. I certainly feel I've been exposed to stories and truths that have influenced my cultural competence development. I feel humbled to know Trevor Noah's story and to better understand what life was like for colored and black families under the apartheid rule.